You are now listening to Project Discourse Radio. What's up, everyone? I'm Stephanie from Project Discourse Radio Podcast, and tonight we have put together such a phenomenal segment for you entitled Blurring the Lines, Being Pro-Black While Dating Interracially. This highly discussed topic is often met with swift and harsh criticism, and quite honestly, it has caused a lot of tension in our community, especially among Black women. We've put together an awesome panel of Black individuals who identify as pro-Black to discuss their stance on the ability to date interracially while progressing their nation. So feel free to join us on the discussion below in our comments section. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the show. In today's society, it's easy to see countless images and videos documenting the harrowing treatment of Black and brown people at the hands of whites and others from varying ethnicities and nationalities. For hundreds of years, we have had to witness the torment and terror executed upon our nation. For a time, as Black people, all we had was each other. Though we may have had some allies, a la Jim Brown, your brother or sister was really the only person that could relate to your struggle. Because of this, Black and brown people have had to work overtime for years to encourage, uplift, and support the members of our community. We have had to constantly reaffirm and remind ourselves of who we are. We do so without any real understanding of our culture or our history prior to the diaspora. Though our pain extends beyond the depths of our soul, we have not been broken. We continue to fight, and we continue to build. We do so by being pro-Black, for our nation, by our nation. The question remains, though, can we fight and build with our perceived enemy? Today, we tackle a very difficult and sensitive subject. What happens when the pro-Black male or female finds love and happiness in a non-Black partner?
It's not an easy yes, but I feel like a lot of times, so being pro-Black has to do with supporting your culture, you know, wanting what's best for all of us, and especially being on the front lines when it comes to equality and justice.
Yes.
And a lot of times, when we focus on the anger side of that, equality can be flipped on its head, and then you start campaigning for supremacy. Mm-hmm. And so if pro-Black does not mean Black supremacy, then of course you can date outside the race, because that gives you the most opportunity to educate others.
So first I'll start with, how do you define pro-Black?
I'll go ahead and start, since, pro-Blacks to me is someone who is for his people, or he or she does for their people above others. They make our people a priority.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and start. I'll answer as well. This is Angel. For me, it really means to walk the walk and not just talk about it. Being pro-Black is about more than a Facebook post. It's in your daily job, hiring Black people, mentoring Black people at work. It also means shopping in Black neighborhoods, not going to the white neighborhoods to spend your money, and not saying things like, I get better service in the white neighborhoods. It's, if you're getting bad service in a bad neighborhood, you hold people accountable and you let them know. I refuse to spend my money in other neighborhoods.
Righteous. Okay. Anyone else would like to add to that?
I guess when I would think about pro-Black, it's like all everything, as they like to say. As Bilal kind of talked about right there, just talking about being down for your people. They come first, making a priority. And just kind of making sure, I think within reason, making sure that we're supporting each other as much as possible. I'm not a believer in just because you are Black that I need to support you. We need to be on that same wavelength at times. So I think having that commonality as well. And I'm not saying that I'll deny a Black person because of this, but things that I think being pro-Black, there is an accountability with being pro-Black as well. Is that I'm holding them accountable just like I'm holding myself accountable.
Right, right. Okay, anyone else?
I think to piggyback off of him, being pro-Black to me means, you know, I support all things Black and definitely the betterment of the Black community, even to the point where, as you and I have talked before, that Black communities need to get down to the roots of things and figure out, you know, how we improve, how we become better as a people. Some of it is stuff, you know, touchy stuff you don't want to touch on, but I believe so much in us as a people. I think that once we do those type of things, you know, the community as a whole will improve.
Definitely, definitely. Anyone else want to add?
Same here. I mean, in a nutshell, just the advancement in the form of social, political, economic, and cultural issues to push, you know, who I am and who I feel my people are, and to also represent my people in a way to show, not in a very uncomfortable way, but to show that I am for my people in the way I walk, in the way I dress, how I speak. Yeah.
Right, right.
Can I add one more part to that too?
Absolutely.
I like what everybody said. I just think another thing about pro-Black for me is like, in a sense of I'm not denounce other people and try to put my people above just because I am Black. I have to do it respectfully in a way.
Right. I would think the general consensus is, you know, being pro-Black does not make you anti-white or anti any other ethnicity. It's more so about the upliftment and the forward progress of our nation as a whole.
Right.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, Miss Steph, it's making me anti something because my whole life it's in a state of change, a state of flux. It's not just been happening. The way I've been thinking and the things I've been doing has been happening, you know, over, you know, probably the last 10 to 15 years. I just haven't had, I suppose, a platform to start affecting change, basically. You know, not just for myself, but with my family and friends and stuff. It's affected my relationship with family and friends, because I like to say myself that I don't ride by society's rules, and because of that, you know, you seem like a bit of an outlaw. So being pro-Black, it's having an effect on me. Just about everything that everyone said just then, it makes absolute sense to me. Apart from the fact that it's hardening me, it's changing me. To be honest,
I get it.
I agree. It's also educating. You know, you spend a lot of time educating people, even people who are Black. You know, I spend a lot of time saying, you know, well, white people have had, you know, 300-400 years of a head start on some of the things that we're trying to accomplish in the Black community in terms of, you know, business ownership and all of this other stuff. They've been able to develop best practices, and, you know, those best practices and their learnings from 400 and 500 years in America, you know, those haven't been passed down. And so, you know, we can't sit there and say, when dealing with other Black businesses or in the Black community, well, it's just better, you know, if I go to a white neighborhood. It's not, because they've had a head start in doing all of this.
I want to add to that because the standard has been set by a certain group of individuals, correct? And I think that since that so-called standard put in place for 400 years, we know what this side looks like. So anything that doesn't look like that, see it as kind of less than, like the quality isn't as good or the service isn't as good. But it might be because, you know, in our culture, we work a little bit differently, and it's not always to that of societal norms. So we kind of get into this and to kind of this flux of like comparing those types of things. And I guess I can say for myself is like, sometimes I got to catch myself, because I realize that, hey, I take on that idea of what has been promoted for my life, and try to put that on my own people, and realizing that ain't our reality. And trying to work between those two can sometimes be cool. When you start talking about, quality versus service and all these other types of things, because we have our own way, but we've been told that this other way has been better for years, and that doesn't always work out well for us.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the times we can focus on singular experiences and put a label on the whole community as a whole. Whereas those are just singular experiences, and we do not do that for other cultures because we have bad experiences with them too. But we won't say, that's how they are. We won't put a label on that. And that's what I believe that's what our problem is as Black people, is that, we do things differently, but we need to be more patient and, like this said, hold one another accountable in a very respectful way, but not to actually label it as just how Black people are. Not fair to, the Black businesses that are not like that and that rise to the occasion and above all the time.
Well, to kind of bring it back on to topic, as we all have defined pro-Black, one of the members asked me personally what my definition of pro-Black is. And that's being pro-Black is advocating a lifestyle that primarily focuses on the empowerment and progress of those of the Black race. It is also centered on creating and uniting Black families in an effort to strengthen the Black family structure. And so the pro-Black stance also encourages economic growth by buying Black in order to stimulate generational wealth to aid with sustaining the Black community. So based on that definition, do you really believe that we could actually be pro-Black and date or marry interracially? Which is a tough question.
When you actually pose that question, I took some time to really think about that, because for me, I'm initially like, no.
Right.
And that's not to step on any other relationships, because, at the helm of everything, I just believe in love and what's beautiful. Mm-hmm. But in my case, in my thought process, in my upbringing and what I wanted for my family and my children, I definitely do not feel that you can be both pro-Black and in an interracial relationship. I don't believe that the focus there is not on the Black family. You have to succumb to the other person's cultural needs. It becomes something so that deals with the spirit, how you talk and deal with others, how you walk about in the world. I mean, it goes so deep. And it started really, when I started really getting into why I have always been that way, I started looking at how the Black structure of our family has always been torn down and broken apart. And why would I want to even go outside of that? So for me, I personally feel, nah, you cannot be both pro-Black and date interracial.
Okay.
I will also add to that marriage is a financial contract. So me as a Black man, knowing that men, for the most part, don't live as long as women do. So let's say I have a white woman, we have children together, right? So all the financial assets that I build up will go to that white woman, and she will continue to raise her children. At whatever point that I've passed away, she will continue to raise her children, and she will raise them how she was raised from her white environment. And all the financial resources will go to white people, white communities. So all those resources, the things that I built up, will be lost to me. The children will be lost to me. And as I think about it, I can't think of anybody that is famous and Black or African American that married outside of our race, somebody white or Hispanic or whatever the case may be, but we're still pro-Black. And I will have to challenge anyone to give me an example. If you can bring me one example, it's probably going to be the only one.
I'm trying to think of a person. I thought Angie Davis was married to white man, but she actually had married a black man, and they divorced, and now she identifies as lesbian. So there goes that. So my only example, like, all right, Angie Davis, you know, she was, you know, but no.
Well, the only example I can think of myself is Byron Allen, but I think some people could also pick holes into that choice. I only pick him because of the fact that his recent fight for the protection, the Civil Rights Act of 1866. But some people's criticism of him has been that he really only was just pro-black in that moment to get our support to support a strengthening of that law, which supported his financial interest. And I think in a way it doesn't matter, but still at the same time, this black man who now owns the Weather Channel is married to a white woman, and when he passes on, it goes right back into white hands. So that's 50-50.
Yeah, the example I can think of is an old boxer, Jack Johnson, who actually I think he married about 3 or 4 white women, and he was very, very much pronounced in that. But I'm not sure how much of his stance was pro-black in it. But I just to answer your original question about can you be pro-black and date interracial, I don't think so, because if you go back to the definition that you spoke about, it's talking about building up that family aspect. And if you do have children who are biracial, and just kind of like Bilal talked about, now you're bringing in 2 cultures. So
Right.
you're going to be raising your child up in 2 cultures to make sure that both parents are representing that case. For myself, like my significant other, is Hispanic, and so for myself, even though we may have very similar experiences and things like that, there is still like a difference when you speak to that, because how somebody is raised, but we can be raised on the same block, but we're going to have 2 totally different experiences. And my experience as a black man versus her experience as a Hispanic woman are going to be totally different. And we run down all the different statistics and things like that. But so for myself, I don't think you can't have both of those together. It's either you're in or you're out type of a thing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
So my mom is white and my father is black. And I grew up to be a very pro-black woman. I never felt during my upbringing that I was being influenced by one culture more than the other. I felt like my parents gave me the freedom to become who I wanted to be as an individual. I would probably also say that my mother was more outspoken for Black issues and racism and support than probably my father was. In his career, he started off in the United States Coast Guard, and he was often the only Black person in some of his stations at the time in the 70s. And so, we were just inundated with white people and white friends, but that never stopped him from being pro-Black or bringing up Black issues with his friends or having discussions, about being Black. I never felt like he was any more, or less, into the Black movement. I grew up knowing everything about being Black.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Reese?
So I have a biracial child. I'm an African American woman, of course, and my son's father is white. My son is 21 years old. I have always raised him to, I never made him feel that he had to choose a side because he was both. It is my belief that, how children or how you, teach children about their race and things, or about the other parent, they internalize that. And those are the things that they think about themselves. So I never made him think anything about the white race. All I did was, raise him in a loving household. He saw how we interacted, my family. Now, granted, we weren't married. I had him at 18. So there was a mom's house and there was a dad's house. So he got to experience both cultures separately without one of us being in the other space. Now I am married to a Black man, which when my son was 7 is when I got married. So he was raised with a Black stepfather and a Black mom in our household. Still has a great relationship with his father on that side of the family. But my son, Noah, is very pro-Black. And that was not any of my trying to steer him in one way or the other, but just based off what he saw, through his life. He went to an HBCU. He is very much a Black man. And, part of me wants to laugh about it, because if you saw Noah and you look at him, you do not see a Black man. He's very much, fair skin, dark hair, but he kind of looks Hispanic maybe, but very fair skin. But he is definitely pro-Black. And I think somewhere along the lines in raising him, he, I think I did a good job of teaching him about his culture. I left his, the white side and that part of his culture, that was up to his dad. That wasn't my part to teach him on that, that was, so I think I did a good job teaching him about the Black culture, because that's what he identifies as. If you ask him, he will say he's Black. He's very much pro-Black.
Yes, we learn it on our own because society reminds us that we're Black.
I remember a story that Reese was telling me when Noah told her, what was the story where he said if he got pulled over by the cops or something he said, and I just busted out laughing because I was like, Noah, it's not gonna happen.
Well, all of his friends are African-American males, and he was on the basketball team in his high school. So these are, big guys, and they're riding around in his car, and he got pulled over twice in the same day by police who were kind of just asking him a bunch of questions. He didn't really feel like they were pulling him over for any particular reason, and it upset him. And he came home, and my husband, who was a police officer, he came home to talk to us about his experience, and he said, I know why they pulled me over. He said, they only pulled me over because I'm Black. And at that point, I had to chuckle to myself, because when you look at my son, you don't see an African American man. But to him, in his heart of heart, that's who he is, and that's what he goes with.
So the reason I brought that up is because, just to segue into the next question, it's can you effectively build a solid relationship with someone who is unable to relate to your daily struggle as a person of African descent? Most of us want partners who can identify with us on as many levels as we possibly can get. So being Black is something that we are 24/7. So do you think it's possible?
I don't think so, because I think that being Black and everything that entails, our experiences and our history and our culture, and just being who and what we are, and expressing that in a lively way as we do, that rubs certain, people from other groups the wrong way. When we are neutered and we are in a way like we're Black, but not too Black, not outlandishly Black, then people can deal with us, right? And so we have to, when we're in these interracial relationships, give up something, maybe not all, but something, just to not be too much of what we are for others. Maybe somebody disagree with me, but or if you are the kind of person like myself, I was married to an Arab woman, and I was just being me. But I think that even in the beginning, if they kind of, I guess, listen to what you have to say about your experiences in your life, and they kind of just listen, but it really just goes in one ear and out the other ear, and the only person who's going to really understand who you are and what you're going through and how you're feeling and your frustrations and your joys, your laughter and your crying, is somebody who can relate to you and has gone through the same thing.
That's very true. That's very true. I couldn't put it better myself, to be honest.
Yep.
People don't get it. They don't understand. And as much as Bilal said, you can give so much of who you are away. People just don't. They won't get it. Won't get it. And so, no. In answer to your question, no, it can't be done.
I think in any relationship, you have to give up a portion of who you are, regardless of color, for that to regardless of color for any relationship to work. But I will say this, because I am mixed or biracial. I don't date white men. I've only dated black men. I've never dated a white man, only because, for a lot of the things that you guys have said, because I don't feel like they'll ever 100% support who I am as an individual and some of the issues that I faced as a black woman. And I just feel like I would get more of that understanding in a black partner.
Yeah. Well,
I want to chime in.
Go ahead.
I'm biracial also. My dad is white and my mom is black. And I do feel like growing up in our house, my mom did compromise some of her blackness. In fact, race really wasn't, it was kind of a taboo topic in my house. Like, we didn't discuss race. And granted, my dad, he's white, but they met at a Clarence Carter concert, and he was married to a black woman previously to marry my mom, and so he's all for black culture, but he doesn't identify as black or anything like that. But so yeah, I do think that you do have to compromise when you're in an interracial relationship.
So let me ask this question, because there is a difference between the African American experience and the African experience. So I guess maybe Celeste, you may be able to speak to this, because I know that with dating an African American male, he may more so relate to any struggle that I may go through versus maybe someone who was born and raised in Africa who may not have any connection to, what we deal with in the States. So could that also be a part of this equation?
For me, For me, it is. That's just from my personal experience. When I dated a man from the Ivory Coast, and I remember him asking me one time, would I ever date a white man? And I said no, blatantly. He seemed to be taken aback by that. Like, he was curious as to why not. What's the problem? And I was letting him know, as a black woman and as a mother to a black son, I want my son and my household to be raised with a black father. I believe in the black family structure, but he didn't relate to me on that. He didn't think it was a big deal, because from his experience, he had dated other women, primarily Caucasian women, and I never asked him if I was the first African American woman he's dated, but I noticed his in his demeanor, in his question, he felt some kind of way of why I wouldn't want to date outside of my race. So dealing with in that particular situation, dealing with just an African man versus an African American man was very different for me. And I told myself I wouldn't date an African man unless he was a second generation African man who grew up in America and understands my struggle. Because I have friends where we all grew up, in Oakland, and we understand, the struggle or what we go through. It is very different from the eyes, I notice, just African men. And he's not, yes, I dated him, but I've spoken to even his friend, his best friend, had his wife was Caucasian in that particular situation. And I've spoken to a lot of African men, and a lot of them don't mind or prefer, or that's just what they like to, date. So I think it's definitely different, and it speaks to that to me as well. I would want someone who knows and has similar struggles as I've had, and not even just struggles, upbringing, ideas, ideologies, outlooks.
Culture.
Definitely culture, and I even think about that now. I'm not interested in really remarrying, but that does cross my mind. Like, gosh, if I'm living in another country, I know how much I love my Black men.
Yeah. Yeah.
I cannot, to my core. That's just me.
I get it.
I want to share. Thank you guys for sharing. I'm just thinking about because how I grew up. I grew up with my mother and my grandmother, and so these was my first two examples of Black women, and I see a lot of the pain that like a lot of the like anger and like hurt and things like that just from like their previous experiences as being a Black woman, like growing up without spouses or significant others, things like that. And so it was my introduction into Black women. And for me, and as I was growing up, I always had this idea of like, I don't want to date that. Like, I don't want that feeling. Like, I would feel that in it. And, so that was how I identified with some Black women were actually through the lens of looking at my mother and my grandmother. And I start looking at some of the things that my sisters would go through or neighbors, and it all kind of looked the same. And I didn't want that experience, I guess. And I'm from a different place. Like I came from Las Vegas. Some people come from other places where they have much different experiences, and you have Blacks around you who are empowering. You see these couples and these marriages and stuff like that. And I didn't have those examples. So it wasn't, my examples were, off of TV, and we know that was only TV. So as I continue to progress into like my teens and things like that, I always had that visual of what Black women were. And so for me, it scared me as I started to get older and being able to date, because even as I started to date into like my early 20s and stuff like that, I started running into certain women, and they kind of mimic some of those things. I like my mother, my grandmother, and I didn't feel like it fit my personality or who I was as a person. And I felt like it was almost kind of like, it was that disconnect. But now, like what I've kind of, after living out in Las Vegas and kind of going through these, living my experiences living in Egypt now, and being able to look back at my country in a different lens and understanding this idea of like pro-Black and the Black experience now, like my mind has really shifted, because when I was in the middle of it, I didn't really understand, and I was actually pulling out. So I actually see the whole Black experience, the Black woman and things like that in a totally different lens than I did growing up, because of what my first couple examples were. And so that really played on me as I got older into the dating phase.
That's very interesting and honest, and very honest. I definitely can appreciate that.
No, I because of mass incarceration, there's a lot of, there's some people that it's just not available. Yeah. And I'm just tired of seeing my sisters alone. You are a good woman, and you deserve to have happiness. You deserve to have happiness like everyone else. And the issue here that we're trying to like walk eggshells over is, why do you feel like you can't go outside of your race without someone?
I will say it then. I feel like what they said. I feel like I would be turning against them.
Right.
That's real.
That's what I'm saying. And
you're
I'm
not.
so glad you were honest about that.
You will have people actually criticize you for it, and that's the reality.
Yeah.
I didn't know how much criticism I would get once I introduced my boyfriend to the world because of my lifestyle at home. Everybody was so, welcoming. But the moment I went to the Billboard Awards, I'll never forget it. It was the first time this American sweetheart experienced so much hate, and I didn't understand it. Yeah. So I'm really happy that we are talking about this now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't be afraid. Love.
Don't be afraid.
Love is love. And that's the beautiful thing about God, and I hope, I mean, heaven. The thing is we're going to have all different types of races there.
And I applaud you for taking that moment. It was a struggle for you.
It was. I was trying to skirt over it, but you know, Lonnie is like a truth serum behind what makes you.
But everybody of a culture, you might not take the moment to just think behind why haven't you ventured out if you don't. And if you prefer not to, that's fine. But just to wonder if there's something holding you back from stigmas or old ideologies. Like.
What's going on, y'all? I thought I'd make a video. I was thinking about this this morning when I woke up. I mean, I think about this all the time, but I was thinking about it heavily this morning because a lot of people have initiated discussions with me about this. Obviously, I have my own personal thoughts and experiences with this certain subject, but it came up and it keeps coming up time and time again about why do black men date white women. Now, I'm going to tell you what, over time, I've noticed that it is it's something that's trending more than it used to, 20 years ago or whatever, from my perspective, from my opinion and what I've seen personally. And what I like to say about it is that it has more to do with culture than it does race. Okay. And I can say some of these things because I have personal firsthand experience. And I'll start with just a little background about me. I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, predominantly all African-American community for most of my life. In the African-American communities, there are certain things that you do and you do not do. For a lack of a better terms, certain things you do, you lose your race card. You lose your black card. And I hate to say it, but it's reality. We got to be transparent and honest. It's reality. So growing up, my sense of reality and relationships was based on what I saw predominantly, what I saw in my own personal life as far as my parental relationships and different things like that. So I can say this, and I'm not saying this is static and this is consistent with every single African-American person on planet Earth. It's not. I'm not saying that. Just my own personal experiences with what I saw. Every black woman, and growing up from the age, from when I was born from when I started dating to when I turned like 22, I had never dated a woman who wasn't African American. Never dated outside my race. And a lot of it was because that's a lot of what I was exposed to in our black community. And also it was stigmatized. You date anything outside of black, you will sell out, so on and so forth. So anyway, but I have to say every single African-American female that I dated either didn't know their dad or didn't have a good relationship with their dad. Was in a single parent home or was in a remarried situation where either dad didn't know dad or dad wasn't involved, or he was, like a secondary parent. And with that comes issues, insecurities, and other things like that. Hands down, no matter what race you're involved in, those circumstances and situations are counterproductive to a healthy, conducive life in its totality. Not saying that you can't be healthy with those circumstances. It's just better if you have a streamlined representation of the way the family structure should be. So I have to say, but that was normal to me. My parents aren't together. Although my dad has been in my life the whole time, both my parents are very active, but they weren't together. So growing up, that's what I thought was normal. Fast forward that to when I went to college. Now, going to college opened my eyes to a lot of things because, to be quite honest, when you look at the demographic of most major universities, you're going to see that there is an overwhelming number of white people in comparison to where I grew up at, where you never saw white people unless they were a teacher at your school or they the police. And going to college is a huge culture shock because you are now the minority. Now, everything in life is not Afrocentric. It's not from an African-American perspective. And you have to now figure out how that applies to your life. So long story short, I got to college and a lot of myths start being unveiled because growing up, you don't date white women. You bring a white woman home or you date a white woman. And I'm not saying this is my parents. This is society. This is peers. You date a white woman, you'll sell out. You get clowned. They talk bad about you. Every name in the book. You want to be white, whatever the case may be. So, and that white women didn't have good bodies. They didn't have no rhythm, and you can't bring them home. That was stigmatized in a lot of young black men growing up. It was stigmatized in me growing up. Got to college, found out that those things were in large part a myth. But the biggest thing and the most crucial point that I'm trying to make here is that when I got to college, I started seeing things that I never thought of before. My understanding of the world started changing. It sounds funny because I never heard of sushi before I went to college. I didn't know what sushi was. Somebody mentioned it to me. I'm like, what's sushi? I never heard of that. I never knew anybody that went on a hike before. Never heard of hiking as much. It wasn't something that black people never did. From my perspective, there's a lot of other things I never thought of before. Organic food. Never heard of organic food growing up. Nobody ever ate organic food. I remember going to the grocery store and the rare times I saw organic food, I thought something was wrong with it. I thought it was the abnormal food. I thought the normal food was the stuff that don't have the labels on it, and then the stuff that said organic was some kind of weird food, some kind of stuff that got hormones in it or something crazy. That's why they charge more for it. That's what life was like for me. That's what reality was. And I got to college and I started being introduced to these different aspects of life, different avenues of life that I didn't know about. And so therefore, my mindset towards dating and women started changing, because now I realize, I really like sushi. I think hiking is a great idea. I love hiking. I love exercise. Organic food obviously is better for you. I really want to eat organic. So then the funny thing is that now when your dating pool starts to be evaluated, now white women become more of the prototype for what I wanted. And I'm not saying it's every white woman is like that. Every black woman is not like that. What I'm saying is that that's kind of happens to you when you go to college based on a demographic and or experiencing an exposure to different realities. So with that being said, that's what I started seeing. And I started realizing that single parent homes weren't normal. I started realizing that not knowing your dad ain't normal. And I start seeing situations and cultural situations where I was exposed to women who knew how to treat a man, because mom and dad was married her whole life. And she knew how to be ladylike, how to be compassionate, how to be loving, and different things that I think that some cultural dynamics hinder people from being exposed to and experiencing. And so that became attractive. That became a necessity. I wanted to start over. I wanted to have a life that I didn't have. I wanted to be exposed to things that I didn't have. I wanted to be exposed to the family dinners that I didn't have. And the grandma and grandpa been together, mom and daddy been together, everybody in the same family, everybody got the same kids. It becomes appealing to young African-American men who come into college and be exposed to a life that they could not have previously and that they were not exposed to. So now, and again, I want to preface that it's more about culture and less about race. And so you get indulged in this culture and you realize that this culture is something that you think is better for you. It's more conducive to your success and your happiness. And then you never go back. You never go back, and that is now the standard. And it typically ends up being more white women. Now, for me, obviously, and most black people I know, that race don't mean anything, but that cultural dynamic does. And what happens is there's a certain group of people primarily fall in that cultural dynamic. And then there's a certain group of people that fall in in the previous culture dynamic. And that stimulates the dating pool and certain young men who decide to date outside of their race.
So, okay, so with that said, how do you think that being in an interracial relationship can affect the Black family? Do you think it can add or take away from the Black family structure?
Validation.
Now you said mistake. People are going to be mad at you by saying he made a mistake by marrying a white woman.
Sure.
Why do you say that's a mistake? Because shouldn't it be the man fell in love with who he fell in love with?
No, because marriage is a political decision. Who you marry tells me who you are. When you marry a woman, you don't just marry her. You marry her culture. You marry her community. You marry her people. You understand? So when a Black man marries a white woman, he's making several clear points and messages he's sending out to his own people. Because there's no greater symbol of your loyalty to your struggle than to marry a sister who shares that struggle. Loving versus Virginia, and y'all need to see the movie. It just came out a few months ago. 1957, right about around that time, a white man named Loving from Virginia sued up to the Supreme Court for the right to marry a Black woman. Up until then, several states still had anti-miscegenation law. After they struck down anti-miscegenation law across the country, 1957 or 67, somewhere within there, Black men have married outside their race envy more than the men of all other races in America put together as a percentage. How do you explain that? Is love purely blind? I disagree. Love is a function of your values and your priorities. I would argue the reason Black men marry white women is because they wish they were white themselves, and having the white man's prize, his queen, is a psychological symbol to myself that I am equal to him. So you can't be in love with white women and not at the same time feel inferior to white males.
Well, listening to what everybody else has said and thinking about, my half-white son, I'm sitting here reflecting and thinking about, now at the time, I didn't think about, me having an interracial relationship and producing a child, how it could potentially water down my bloodline, my history. I didn't really think about it at that time, but thinking now, I'm sitting here reflecting on it now. If my half-white son here and marries a white woman, how the things that I instilled in him, hopefully, I trust that he passes that on. But realistically, what are the odds of that when potentially he could have these now, almost full white kids that are now my grandkids, and then that does water it down a bit. So I see where that could be an issue.
I don't necessarily think that a bloodline can get watered down. I mean, if we look at, I'm only speaking from the United States and America. Many Black families now have white people in their family because of slavery and raping slaves and stuff like that. And those families are still Black. Their bloodlines aren't watered down. We're just the immediate product of being part of an interracial relationship. But I don't necessarily think that it will water down anyone's bloodline, because I bet if you pull the DNA of a lot of African Americans, you'll find that there's some European descent.
I guess the idea when you start talking about the Black family experience, what would that be defined as?
Culturally, I just remember growing up. I think I was 16 years old. I was in the kitchen with my grandmother, and we were talking about when I get married. And she looked at me with all seriousness, and she told me, "Don't ever bring a white man in her house." And I knew she was considerably serious, but when I discussed it more with her, one of the things that she did mention was that we have to carry over our culture, and that there would be things that I would go through that this person may not understand. And so in order to be a woman that's protected, I need to be with someone who would understand what I deal with on a daily basis. So I guess with that, it's more so passing down your culture, your heritage or your religion, you know, anything that pertains to your particular family and your family unit.
I think that in America or in the West in general, there's this sense of individualism versus the collective. And I think that plays into culture, taking pride in your culture, identifying with your culture, passing on your culture. So I think in this day and age, individualism reigns over, you know, culture and collective. So I think that regardless of someone's race, I think we're becoming more of a melting pot culture-wise because the emphasis is on the individual. So I think in all families, I think, that plays a role as far as culture being passed down.
Yeah, and just to like add something also to that, like I grew up in a, 2-parent household that both parents were Black. But then I didn't have the same upbringing that my 2 Black parents had either. So like I went to private school that was predominantly white. I have a network that's mixed racially, culturally, economically. So it's kind of tough in terms of like you just thinking you dating within your race is gonna have the same cultural pass downs. Because like me and my mom don't think the same, and I was raised in her house, and we're both Black, and we just have 2 different perspectives on a lot of those things still. So like, I mean, obviously I'm, unapologetically Black. I predominantly date within my race, but I have no problem stepping outside if the connection is there. But just assuming like me having a Black wife would have the same cultural pass downs as like the ones that my parents gave me, I think would just, it wouldn't be like a just for sure assumption.
Do you think it has something to do with the generation? Because the generation to generation, things are different, but at its core, you may have the same principles and values as your mom and your dad.
Yeah, I mean, probably. I mean, a lot of it is just exposure. So like I'm exposed to a lot of cultures and people that my parents weren't exposed to. Like they grew up in an era where you were with your family, your friends, and those are usually people that looked like you. Now we're in a day and age where you have the internet. We're exposed to a lot of different cultures. And on top of that, there's a lot of cultural crossover too. So there's things that aren't just for Black people that only Black people do. We've taken ownership over a lot of things, but it's just because we didn't know other cultures are also doing certain things like us as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's just an exposure thing.
Could it also have like experience also have a lot to do with it in terms of what we've experienced growing up? Because I grew up right outside of DC in a very affluent neighborhood where there were very few Blacks. However, my husband grew up in North Carolina on a tobacco farm. So our upbringings are very different. Our experiences are very different. Therefore, and our experiences have helped shape, who we are. I feel like for me, like where I grew up, in the area I grew up, my first experience with race or anyone making me feel like, okay, like making race an issue were from other Blacks. It wasn't from whites. It was from other Blacks who always made me feel just because of fair complexion and hair, I was never Black enough. Certain things I wanted to do and I get laughed at, like, why are you doing that? You can't do that with your hair, or you're not Black enough to do that type of thing. So I think location and like where you grew up and where you were raised with and those but my family was very pro-Black and we did Black things. It's just the other experiences that I have that kind of shaped, and then I get married to a man from North Carolina who grew up on a tobacco farm, and we have kids, and sometimes we butt heads on, certain things that our kids should and shouldn't do because it's based on how we were both raised and the experiences that we both had growing up.
I mean, I'm sorry, Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, I love that you touched on that because I've been wanting to mention that to me, it becomes a proximity game as well. Yeah. And so for myself I'm gonna speak like to the idea of Durant. Like my first year of high school, I went to an academy in Las Vegas, and the academy was predominantly white. And so all of my classmates are white. and things like that. So, I mean, I think we had in out of 800 students, I think there was 20 Black students whole school. And then my last years of high school, I transferred to the high school in my neighborhood where majority of people are like me. But then my next 4 years of university, I go to school in Idaho, and I'm the only Black student on campus for 2 years. We never had, out of 720 students, didn't have a Black female counterpart on campus. And then I hop into education in the US, which we 80% white female. And so a lot of things that I've done, even the activities, I like to run, I like to snowboard, I like to do these water sports and things like that. We don't dominate those spaces. You know what I mean? So when I start looking at a lot of some of these things too, when we start talking about maybe looking at these interracial relationships, we're looking at commonalities. It's not even about the skin color anymore. It's about commonality. It's about proximity, because you're going to date who you're around. That's just like when they talk about murder. You murder those people you are around. And so it comes down to that same idea. And just like what Teresa was just speaking about, is that you can have these two Black people who come together, and you're going to start talking about, just because we're Black, we're in the same space, we think we're going to have this kind of collective idea. But no, we got different ideas on finances. We got different ideas on disciplining our children. We got differences, these other things too. So, and so for myself, I found myself in just proximity, even moving here to Egypt. I mean, before I found the Black in Cairo group, I didn't really see Black folks, because even in my school, I'm one of few. You know what I mean? So again, my spaces have been so much different compared to a lot of other people spaces.
That's actually how Reese and I met. We both went to high school together, and we're the only Black girls that prefer rock music to rap. We just were different. We were completely different from all the other Black students. And so we related to one another on a lot of things. And so, you know, what she said was extremely accurate. It does, you know, your location and where you are does play a significant role in your life, especially when it comes to being Black, and how you see other Black people and how you see other races. So go ahead, Celeste.
I wanted to touch on that because going to predominantly white schools for the first several years of my life, and then going to predominantly Black school was a culture shock. I knew I was Black. I always identified as Black, even when I was a little girl. I only wanted a Black Barbie doll. I was very pro-Black, and my mother raised me in that way, in that sense. However, I do know that a lot of the time, and most of the time, race was really only brought up around in the Black neighborhood or the Black community much more often, because my swag was different. I spoke different. I acted different. I had different, and it was just individualized of my experience of how I was brought up, because it can go even deep into the music I listened to, and what I was exposed to. That was just completely different from everybody, but I was actually pondering this the other day when I was in it's interesting that we're touching on this, being with my children. I'm like, gosh, what would they identify as? I know what my husband and I were raising them, but half of them were born in Egypt. The rest of them were raised in Egypt, besides my oldest. They're used to a 2-parent family, but now because my husband passed, it's just me. And I'm talking about moving to a country that is predominantly Caucasian or Maori or whatever. What is their life or their lens? I want them to be multicultural and to have all these different experiences in life. But I'm like, gosh, what does that look like to them? And I'm always, I will sit down and just ask them what that looks like to them, or how they feel, because as we're going through this life or this experience in life, I just want to know where their stance is, or do they even have a stance? Or do they even understand what a stance is? Because they never even saw a Black community until we came to the States.
I think they'll more so understand more of a biblical community. They'll relate more to the Bible versus, what we grew up, just because how you and Yatazab had raised them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we also have to look at something important, which is what is Black culture? Because as I look at people from other countries, they have a culture which is a way of thinking and a way of doing things and traditions and customs that they all agree upon that no outsider can come in and break.
Yeah.
We don't have that. All of that was stripped from us. We have an issue with unity because we all act and talk and think like individuals. And that's why you can get a Black person who grew up in North Carolina with a Black person from Chicago, and there's no kind of groupthink between them. We're just individuals trying to figure out how can we unite. And which is the reason why, like, I think the one thing that unites us together is our struggle. And I think that's the reason why Black celebrities ain't worth 2 cents to the Black community. Because once you get rich, make it, once you got 500 million in the bank, you transcend all that. You kind of live a white life, or you can kind of get away from certain things and escape. So I think one of the biggest things that we haven't answered as a people in the past couple centuries is, who are we? You know, we don't even know what they call each other. My grandmother called herself colored. My mother said Black, and I say African American. So that's just 3 generations. We don't have a name that we all can agree upon. If I tell another African American that I call myself African American, they'll say, well, why you say that? Because I've never been to Africa before. What does Africa got to do with me? You know, and we're the same people from the same lineage. We are the descendants of the slaves and sharecroppers that built America, but we don't have a name for ourselves, let alone anything else. What are our traditions? What are our customs? What are our unique holidays and things that we believe in? We don't have any of that. We just have our struggle. And until we figure out more than that, we're going to continue to face these problems that we have.
I'm going to offer another side to that argument, because I believe we do have a culture, and I do believe that we have experiences and things that are passed down from generation. I think one of the problems is, more recently, all of that stuff has become so appropriated that it's no longer our own. You know, we have cooking. We have cooking, you know, even down, you know, collard greens. You know, now everybody's making collard greens, and, you know, the whole joke about putting raisin in potato salad and all of that other stuff. It's because those recipes have been appropriated over time. You know, we have our own music. We have music, soul music, R&B. You know, those are genres that we've created. Again, appropriated. Dance. We have our own dance in America, in our culture. Again, appropriated. So I think we do have some of those cultural things. They've just been stolen and reused.
But prior
Well,
to
you know what, I agree with you to a certain degree that everything that we do is repackaged and sold and appropriated 100%, even our hairstyles, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the things that we're referring to are things that are basically entertainment, and those things that we were used for during slavery. We sung, we danced, we cooked, all those things that we did for massa. Those are the things that we have today still as quote unquote a Black culture. But what do we have of traditions and customs and things that bind us together other than those things? Like other nations, like other groups, tribes, and people around the world. We don't have any of that.
So I guess
we all think differently.
Our culture in America is young. I mean, other countries have thousands and thousands of years, you know, to have developed the culture. I mean, the Black culture in America is way younger than probably any other Black culture that you would have around the world.
Yeah, I think
Right. I agree, but the thing is, when our ancestors first came over to America, we were Fulani and Hausa and Ibu and Wolof and all these other things. So a lot of the things that we are is the remnants of what we have from Africa that we were allowed to keep. And I think that we have to get back some of that, because I don't think that we're going to invent anything new under the sun to bring us together. I think we've got to get back some of what we lost and reclaim it.
Okay, yeah, I think basically what he was saying is pre-diaspora, what was our heritage and our culture then? Because of course we didn't bring that with us because it was stripped from us. But what she's saying is basically, you know, there's a lot of ingenuity within the Black community. We can create something out of nothing. But just to stay on topic, let's go back to what we were originally talking about. If you are pro-Black and you have interracial or biracial children, how would you want them to racially identify? If you're a pro-Black parent and you're in a relationship, let's say with someone who is from India, how would you expect that child to identify racially if you're pro-Black?
Oh, Lord, you want some more Kamala Harris's, huh?
We'll all be in jail.
And my experience having it with Noah, I think a lot of it, it's funny how the government tried to force feed what my child would identify as. So I got held up in completing his birth certificate. Now he's 21, this is 21 years ago. And on the application, there wasn't the box of more than one race, and it was Black, white, you know, whatever else. And so I wanted to check Black because I was under the belief, what I've always heard, that if you're, you know, anytime you mix Black in, the Black, you know, 2% Black, whatever, you're now identified as Black. Right. But then the nurse came back and was like, no, you are identified by whatever the father is. So they tried to identify my son as a white male. And so I was kind of like, well, wait a minute. He has a Black mother. A Black mother carried him and gave birth to them. How can he only be identified as white? So ultimately, I went ahead and checked Black, but that was before there was the option to choose one or the other. But in raising him, I never made him feel that he had to. I was like, Noah, you are who you are. And it just so happens that he chose to identify.
Dr. Erica Cheeto Childs is an associate professor of sociology at Hunter College. Erica's own relationship with an African-American man prompted more research on individuals like her children, who are the product of different ethnic groups.
We don't have an understanding that someone can be biracial, truly. We use the terminology, but when it comes down to it, I think President Obama is a great example of that. People don't look at him and say derogatory terms necessary that he's biracial, right? He's a Black man, and he himself has said that.
What is the most surprising thing that you found in your research?
I think probably one of the most important things that goes against what a lot of people think is that interracial marriage, biracial identity doesn't matter anymore, that it's a thing of the past. There's the Loving movies, Loving versus Virginia. And a lot of people talk about it as a historical moment in time in 1967 when interracial marriage was legalized, and then everything was fine.
The state of Virginia will argue that it is unfair to bring children of mixed race into the world.
The Supreme Court decision of Loving versus Virginia in 1967 struck down the country's last remaining segregation laws, legalizing interracial marriage across all 50 states and the union of Richard and Mildred Loving. Ruth Nega stars as Mildred in the Loving movie. She's the daughter of an Ethiopian father and an Irish mother.
I just know that when I was growing up in Ireland, I was a rarity. Also, I was very, from a very young age, it was very important for me to maintain my otherness because I liked that. I didn't want to be like anyone else.
Feeling different or excluded is a shared experience among many children of two or more ethnicities. That's largely due to society's lack of understanding around the issue. The census has only recently allowed this population to self-identify as Black and white, Hispanic and Black, white and Asian. Not too long ago, those individuals would fall into one catch-all category: other.
It was like the box. You always felt like other.
Kim Davis was born in the Bronx to a German mother and an African-American father. She self-identifies as a Black woman, though she recalls years of ridicule by members of her own community.
I remember I had gone to a predominantly Black school at one point, and that was probably the most difficult of my experiences.
According to a survey from the Pew Research Center, a majority of mixed ethnicity individuals say they've been the butt of racial jokes and slurs. And about 1 in 4 say they feel frustrated when people make assumptions about their identity.
The Black children, I just remember being very hostile towards me and calling me white. And I sound white, I look white. And I remember, feeling very isolated, very alone.
According to the same survey, about 1 in 5 individuals say they feel pressure from family, friends, or society to identify with one ethnic group. Additionally, experiences and attitudes are vastly different based on the cultures at play.
If you're talking about white Asian biracial children, they tend to be identified as white. They tend to be self-identify as white and be seen as white.
In fact, Asian and white couples are the most common form of intermarriage today.
When you look at analysis of online dating, Black women are the least likely to be chosen by men of any race. Asian men are the least likely to be checked off as possible mates. You look at Asian American men, they are not represented as the epitome of masculinity. They're oftentimes presented as demasculinized. In our films, you may have an Asian or Asian American hero like Jackie Chan, but he doesn't get the girl.
Daytime television provides more examples. Recently, talk show host Steve Harvey apologized for mocking Asian men in a segment that portrayed them as undesirable to women.
On the flip side, Black women have always been devalued in this country. Black women and white women were pitted against each other.
When multi-ethnic individuals seek acceptance among minority communities, they often encounter the open wounds of systemic racism, the privileging of lighter skin, and the glorification of Eurocentric beauty standards.
Interracial relationships are symbolic of a hurtful history as well as a rejection of the Black community.
When a group finds itself on the outside for long enough, and I would say 4 or 5 centuries is quite a long time, there becomes a certain political logic of racial preservation. Sometimes that will translate into the idea that it is on an ethical level not preferable for someone in that ethnic outgroup to marry into another ethnic outgroup. It quote unquote depletes the gene pool. I do not agree with that logic, but I think it's different from what we are seeing more recently as a result possibly of the recent election, or at least the campaign.
So in the instance where you have a biracial child and you are pro-Black, I guess if, of course a child is going to identify with both cultures because you can't ask them to choose. But in, progressing, your culture or on either side, how would that happen? Can you legitimately embrace both 50-50 equally?
The child or the parents?
The child. Because when you ask someone might say, okay, I'm biracial. So we have 3 biracial women, actually. It's strange. We have 3 biracial women on the group tonight. All of them identify as Black. So, and they identify as pro-Black. So what about the interracial woman or the biracial man or woman who let's say they're one of the parents is white and the other is Black, and you have one who identifies as white? You will have that child facing Black people being ridiculed for choosing to identify with being white.
I am a biracial person with a Black mom and a white dad. That is a very different experience than a biracial person with a white mom and a Black dad. Honestly, for me, because I had the Black female influence, I was more raised and inclined toward be a strong Black African American woman. You don't need to recognize that other side, but as I've gotten older, it's kind of created an identity crisis, really, where I'm starting to wonder, am I just this strong side, or is there something else entirely to this. But really, in my life, because my skin is darker than paper, really, I'm mostly identified by the outside world as someone who's African American.
I always have to think about it.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like not to think about it. Oh, do you? Oh.
No.
No, that was a great look at me. No, because the look on your face was like, do you think about it or do you not?
I don't think I ever truly forget when I'm around my friends that I'm Black. I think it's easier for me to forget or to get comfortable, but then there's always something to remind you that you go, oh, yep, that's right. There becomes a comfortability where I'm with my friends and I'm joking and I'm like, oh, let's do makeup, but then they go to put on foundation and it's like, oh, that's definitely not going to fit my color. Is it frustrating? Yes, it can be very frustrating in that sometimes I don't feel like I fit in really either race. Me and my brothers are. We're all biracial, but telling my older brother that he is biracial, you wouldn't be able to. My younger brother can't be picked up by my mom sometimes because people don't believe that he belongs to her. So it really does cause you to have to roll with the punches and to not be so set in the ground that you can't be moved.
Could it be the lack of culture from the other side? And I don't say that to offend, but if you think about Black culture, it's very rich. It's very, Black culture. You have soul food, you have, Kente Club, you got all this Black stuff. And then when I think about my son's white side of the family, what really, like culture-wise, what really do they have that,
That's a good point.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're the Salt Bay. We Salt Bay, but it's like,
And then also, like, for me, so like my dad is white, my mom is Black, and my household was colorblind. Like, everybody's, look at the person as an individual, not as their color. So pro-Black wasn't promoted in my household, but I grew up around all Black people. I'm from a small town. It's mostly Black, and I'm from the rural South. Things are pretty still segregated. Since my mom is Black, I think that's one reason why I was mostly around Black people. But my school is 90% Black. So I do think whoever the children is around, that's what they're going to identify more with. Because I don't identify with white culture, even though my dad is Black. And I spent plenty of time with my dad and his family, but I just don't.
Yeah.
I think my experience when I grew up with biracial kids, it would tended to be which parent they live with, because that would be the culture that would be kind of reflected in their behaviors. Or the other part is what group of kids at school pulled those people in, and that's how they were identified. So it was if it was the light-skinned girl, but she was down with the homegirls, they called her Black. If she was up with the white girls, and they would call white. So I think that, as somebody said, that it does, the child kind of identifies, but then it's also too it's environmental.
True. You know what I think of? I think of Slash from Guns N' Roses. Like, a lot of people don't know he's Black because he doesn't really identify.
Didn't know that.
But he will tell you that he's Black, but he doesn't identify as his mom is Black. Slash's mom is Black. So, I think there's a lot of confusion, I guess, on a child as far as their culture is concerned, because I do think internally, I'm not biracial, so I'm only just speaking from conversations that I've had. There is some kind of inner struggle within someone who is biracial, and I guess Brittany, there are two, but I'm sorry, only Brittany and Angel can actually speak to that, if there is actually some kind of inner struggle in identifying with both cultures.
I identify as a Black man with the full understanding that the rest of the world may not share that impression. There have been many times in my life that I wish that I just looked identifiably Black, whatever that means, so that at least I would have to deal with people honestly and not pretend to be anything else. There are very, very few people who are mixed race that, to me, you cannot visually at least tell that there is something going on. I happened to me, be a bit of a freak show in that white people almost never suspected that I was anything other than white and Jewish. And black people almost never suspected that I was anything other than white and Jewish as well. I'm not ashamed to admit, as a 9-year-old in the 80s, I went with the path of least resistance. Passing for me was a survival mechanism. I could see the way the world treated black Americans, and I made a calculation. I do not want that for my life. The things that helped me realize that passing was sort of a disservice to my legacy and everything that my father had done, and my dad raised me by himself. It was the explosion of Afrocentric thought along with the combination of, oh, I'm part of this experience. My family was a direct part of this movement, and through passing, I have negated everything they had done.
I am a person of color, but I am white passing. That means that I do have white privilege. I am a Muslim, but I don't wear a hijab. And I am Arab. When I speak to someone who doesn't know where I'm from, or when I speak to someone who does not know my name, they automatically think that I am white. And it's a safe space for me because there's a lot of hate towards Muslims, this hatred towards Arabs that's scary, super scary for someone like me. Having privilege is freaking awesome. Nobody's questioning who you are, and it's that moment when people take that privilege away, you feel it. You feel the full impact of, wow, I am being literally profiled right now, and it feels like crap. What I usually need to share with people, especially when it comes to me being ethnically ambiguous, I am Arab, I am Muslim, and I don't judge you. I would appreciate the same from you.
I've been called Peckerwood, I've been called white bitch, I've been called lots of names. Most people think I'm a white woman, and that is both largely a source of privilege for me, and it's also a source of alienation from people who otherwise I would feel comfortable with and part of a community with. A really big part of how race is acted on in our country is based on physical appearance. So I can have all the loving relationships with the black side of my family that I want. When I walk out in the world, I look like this. I think as mixed race people, we still face a lot of pressure from other people who are not comfortable with our identity. I don't think that mixed race people are going to be the saviors of our country, but I think that our lived experience can be beneficial. I think one of the most important things that the burgeoning mixed race population does is that it becomes your neighbor, it becomes your coworker, it becomes the person behind you in the grocery store line. And that demystification of the other is, I think, one of the most critical ways to build bridges across racial divides.
You know, so growing up, I lived in a minority neighborhood, a multicultural neighborhood, and our neighborhood was basically shipped to an all-white elementary school to add diversity to the school. So our school was predominantly white. You know, where I faced struggled is that I knew for the most part that I didn't fit in with a lot of the white students. You know, they would make fun of the way I dressed because I wore British Knights. I remember I was bullied for wearing British Knights, and I'm like, these shoes were like $125. And so I just knew that I didn't fit in. I've always had friends who were from other countries or a minority or Black. I've never really even had white friends. I have some that from playing basketball, but you know, I don't know that I necessarily feel as comfortable around white people as I do around Black people or people from other cultures.
But why is that though?
You know, I was thinking about this. I think it goes back to, you know, the whole, we were talking about where we got racism from the most, either the Black side or the white side. I think that the white side of the racism was more covert, like I said, making fun of the way people dress or their hairstyle or something like that. Whereas Black people would just come out and say, you know, like you're mixed or you're light skinned or whatever, you know, I at least could understand that. Like I couldn't understand why, you know, white kids were making fun of the way I was dressed.
Okay.
Hey guys, what up? It's your girl Liza coming at you. Oh snap, coming at you. And welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today's video is gonna be a little different because it's a little more of a rant about something that I've really been meaning to tell you guys. I'm brown. What? I swear. And if you're new here, welcome to the mystery. I'm brown and you have no idea why. This must be very stressful for you. But if you have been here before, then you've heard the story about my dark chocolate dad and my white chocolate mom swirling together to make rich, creamy, smooth milk chocolate. Now do you want a scoop of me in a sugar waffle cone? But people look at me and they're confused. I'm brown. They're baffled. I'm tinted. They're puzzled. I'm the color of their hot mocha cappuccino. I'm what the world likes to call racially ambiguous, ethnically mysterious, curiously racialized. So pretty much like, dude, what kind of hole did you crawl out of? A white one. Ew. Who had some help from a brown one? Anyways, now you may not relate if you're just a white girl watching this or just a black guy watching this, but you two should meet up, make a mixed baby, and have them subscribe to my channel. But whether you are a mixed kid or you're making the mixed kids, these are some mixed kid problems. People think I'm everything and anything than what I actually am. People think I'm Mexican or Puerto Rican or Brazilian or Colombian or Polynesian or honey roasted barbecue, all the Chick-fil-A sauces. And I always get questions like, what are you? Human? Where are you from? My mother's vagina. What are your parents? Liars, cause I look nothing like them. I swear I'm adopted. And people do think I'm adopted. So my mom is white and I'm brown. So when she would hold my little hand, she was like, hey world, look what cooked in my oven for too long. And the world was like, does anybody see this white lady stealing a little Mexican? But people would always ask my mom if I was adopted. So she would have to explain to them, oh no, her father's a very brown man. He's Indian. I like spices. Oh, you're Indian. And you're me. Don't act surprised. Yeah, she's right. Gordia and America, cause I'm mixed. Not sure if I said that yet. But yeah, so people think I'm everything than what I actually am. I mean, people who know what I actually am don't know what I actually am. My white grandpa would call me his coffee-colored grandchild. And my parents would call me their little Mexican daughter. Now, if that doesn't cause a personal identity crisis, I don't know what does. I swear I am adopted though. I mean, I'm making this video so my parents can just come out and tell me. Or my family in Puerto Rico will claim me. Kidding, I'm kidding, but it's not too late to tell me, Mom. Or should I say, Mama? Trust issues. So yeah, I don't even know what I actually am. My hair doesn't know what I actually am. I can toss it up in a bun or braid it like I'm White Wendy, but I also wake up every morning with a baby afro. I mean, my skin doesn't know what I actually am. I mean, as you can see, I'm brown. What? I swear. But when you look in places that the sun don't shine, I'm white. Why are you two so pale? Why my nipples look like melted Hershey's Kisses? Too much of a visual? Oops. But at least with my skin, you can see that I'm mixed. White mom, brown dad. White mom, brown dad. White mom, really white grandpa. I mean, my friends don't know what I actually am. So growing up mixed is different. You don't really know what group to hang out with. Do you sit with the white kids eating PB&J and Slim Jims with handwritten notes from their mom on their napkins? Or do you sit with the brown kids doing extra credit work at lunch and eating last night's leftover curry? And I didn't want to choose because I didn't want to be a racist 6-year-old, so I grew up with everybody. So I had my white friends, where my dad jokes were hilarious. I got addicted to Pinterest, wore giant t-shirts, and traded cornbread recipes. And these pale friends of mine would ask me to go tanning, and I would say, Jennifer, I already come pre-cooked. So while they tanned, I had my brown friends I would bond with, like, yo, we're brown! Dude, we're related! I'ma see you at the next wedding! Wait a second. You had curry last night too? Yo, do you know this song? That's my jam! Yeah! One time for India! Hey look, I found pants! Okay, wait, what about this song? No, that is a different kind of spice. And it was because I had my Hispanic friends because I'm from Houston, Texas. Houston, Texas. And there was a huge Hispanic population. Y yo puedo hablar español como soy hispana, tacos. And that gave me instant access to homemade tamales, tortas, and taquitos. And when Alondra, Yajaira, and Maria would turn 15, I would turn up. I was all up in those quinceañeras, dancing bachata, smacking piñatas, and twerking my chimichangas. But I didn't really perfect the twerk until I had my black friends that were on my dance team. And that's when little Liza learned the difference between butt and booty. I also learned that I had neither. And after 4 years of them trying to teach me how to twerk, I still look like this. It takes talent, skill, butt cheeks, and I'm pretty sure some math that I missed out learning from Asian friends. I didn't really have a group of them. No offense and nothing against. I love wontons and egg rolls and sushi and dumplings and Honda. Asia. But I loved hanging out with people of different ethnicities. But it confused me even more, especially when it came down to marking what I was on those ethnicity surveys. Am I Caucasian? Not just. Am I Asian? I mean, India is in Asia, but not like egg roll Asia. That's messed up. Where was the box for mixed? Or the box for brown and confused? Or the box someone shipped me in as a baby from Mexico? What? Not sure if you get it yet, but I'm mixed. I'm biracial, I'm proud, and I'm brown. What? I swear! But no matter what, we all have our racial, relatable problems. Even though it's 2016 and we shouldn't see those individual colors, but rather one big old beautiful rainbow with butterflies and cookie pooping unicorns.
So Junior, I have a question for you because Junior, you have biracial children. So, and you're also from a completely different country. You're from England. So I want to know, what do you think the cultural effects, what are the cultural effects that can be imposed upon biracial children? Cultural effects.
Okay, right. Well, I wasn't going to say anything, to be honest, but it's a bit of a long story. My experience, because I've been listening to what everyone's saying, and I just feel, I don't know. My experience hasn't been a very good experience.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 sons, all basically big men now, 23, 20, and 17 now. And when growing up, bringing those boys up, being in that household, bringing those boys up, am I still in?
I can hear you. I just turned my camera off because I'm getting a headache from my ponytail.
All right, sorry, my screen went crazy. Yeah, raising those lads, I was a party to being involved in, doing things with their mother and grandparents and stuff, and I wasn't really into it. I wasn't remotely interested. I went along because they were my sons. But it was very early on, probably in their growing up, probably around 5 or 6 or 7 years old for each and every one of them, where I just wasn't keen on promoting anything white for them. I understood clearly, that they're mixed race and stuff, and it's something that I had to deal with. But I never for one moment had any inclination that I was going to have them being brought up as white. Went through lots of things with these boys growing up. I mean, attending, they're very sporty, just like I was, very sporty themselves now. So there were times when they were, away playing rugby matches and sports and all sorts of things. And in my absence, there were times when they were being targeted, shall I say, by other, very, very bigoted parents and stuff. But that's only in my absence. So very early on, I found myself, when I did attend, if I wasn't working and stuff and going to tournament stuff with them, I'd made a point, an absolute point of having these people being identified, because you go to tournaments, you go to matches, but invariably the same parents are going to be there. So I made a point of going up to these boys, these adults with my boys, and just having it out with them and telling them that you won't be, addressing my children like that or speak to them like that, etc., etc., etc. not just once, went to school where they had issues as well, and I crushed that nonsense as well, because I think the teachers and probably the kids who are abusing my kids didn't think that, or that they probably had the impression that there wasn't someone in the background who would come up and defend and say, this ain't happening, try again with somebody else, type of thing. So yeah, I had a few issues there, but they invariably stopped because I wasn't having it. Plus me being a teacher as well, it just, it's pretty easy in terms of understanding what to do and how to tackle these things. But once again, from a very young age, I taught these boys about blackness. It doesn't matter if you're mixed race, you're black, boys. That's it. And I went through lots and lots and lots of things on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. And it came to a point where, God, I don't know how much I should delve into this. It went really wrong. Put it this way, it went really, really wrong with me and the mother. We went our separate ways and stuff, and some horrible things happened, and just things I had to deal with. I don't want to say what the things are, because they really are pretty shit. Excuse my language. Sorry, I hope there are any kids around. And in terms of, culturally, well, whatever happened, it's kind of gone a bit pear-shaped, because I actually don't have a voice with my sons at the moment. So
and see, that's difficult, because they're young black men growing up in a world that's conditioned to hate them,
Yeah, and they're well aware of the fact that I say to them, barefaced. I can't remember who said it, but I said to them, pretty barefaced, I don't want you, dating in white women and stuff. And my youngest son, he had a girlfriend that was black, and he's very proud of it. Always came back to me, Dad, my girlfriend X, Y, Z, and she's listen. That showed me a picture of her, and it was only young love, and they were going together for about 2 years in school, kind of nonsense and stuff. My other two sons just completely dating whites and wasn't into it at all. And I was just making myself clear, and I think that's what basically turned them. So I don't have any regrets saying it, and I'll do it over again. But yeah, it's just things that they want to hear and how they rebel, I guess.
Yeah, see, and that's why I posed that question, what are, some of the effects that, being biracial can have, because I would imagine that the feeling would be that I would have to choose one, over the other. And it's not a really fair choice to put, upon a child. Okay.
That might have been a deciding issue with this whole thing, being young and just, I don't know if they felt quite pressured, I suppose, into doing this stuff. But they and the weird thing is, and this is nothing to do with me per se, but the weird thing is that they don't have much to do with their aunts and uncles and cousins either. The rest of their cousins, they're all together, always speak together and stuff. So I don't know, it's a bit of a weird thing. But like I say, if I was to go through all this stuff again, I'd do the exact same again. And this is something else. And I don't want to offend any of the I think you say biracial in America, but mixed race people here. I'm deeply embarrassed and ashamed, and I tell people readily, all the time. I don't care. I don't pull any punches when I say that I had children with a white woman, and if there's one thing I regret in life, that's it. And if I could access one thing that you could change, the red pill or the blue pill type situation, and that would be I'd send my children back. I'd send them back and have them with a black lady, and I had the exact sons back, my children back, but there's no way out.
So
no way, absolutely no way. Yeah.
The situation for you has been more so adverse than positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than that. I mean, when we were going our separate ways, me and the mother, it got to a situation where, how can I say it? I'm going to say it straight, where she was, and it's a classic, you know, working with solicitors and, you know, stuff, saying that I turned into a child molester and a woman beater overnight. No record of it, never happened, but that's what happened, that kind of thing. She changed my children's surnames.
Okay, but let me ask this: do you think that your disdain is more so against the mom versus her actually being white?
Possibly.
Because there's some black women that can take it there too.
I'm pretty sure. But I think it's more leaning towards the fact that that she is Caucasian. Yeah.
Okay, that's a fair.
Yeah. The more I've learned, and I know there's the age-old saying that if I knew then what I know now, it could be a completely different story.
Right.
Completely different story. And something else that bothers me as well, and I think I said this to you before, Steph, something that, and this is the reason why I wasn't going to mention anything, but just to listen in, and that's the fact that anybody and everybody, any default answer that someone has to me when they can't say anything else is, but you had 3 children with this person. And I just think that's pretty, it's annoying, because if, you know I try and express myself and articulate myself and say, look, it's, you know, when I said to you just now about sending my kids back, you know, and it just seems that everyone's basic answer, anyone's default answer is, but you had 3 children. So what? It doesn't mean I can't think differently and say things differently and approach life differently. You know, times change, people change, ideas change, ideals change, and it's definitely changed for me. I mean, I want to have another football team or rugby team or soccer team. I don't know what you guys say out there. With a black lady, I'll do it on a spin of a coin if I could tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's just, I've just had a completely different view over the last 15 years.
Any black man who marries a white woman will not get your respect.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
And what I'm telling you is this: I don't care who you name. I don't care how much work you did for black people. Your greatest commitment to black people is being committed to a black woman. It is still a contradiction. No matter how much you think you did for the struggle, if you really were concerned with black people, you would have committed yourself to a black woman. So it doesn't matter how successful they are. It doesn't matter how great you may claim them to be. At the end of the day, you didn't think enough about your own people to marry a woman who looks like you.
I mean, when you say it, it can sound a certain way to people, but it's even still, it's refreshing to see someone be so candid and be so honest about how they actually feel. And I think that's what's lacking in the world, is that we don't really reflect on things that have, you know, changed us. And we can't articulate the things that are very hard to say without feeling that other people may judge us or criticize, you know, our thoughts, but they are just, you know, thoughts. And I'm glad you feel safe in expressing, you know, how you feel on this platform, you know, because this is a judgment-free zone. No one's going to be, you know.
For me, it's an embarrassment. It's a hardcore embarrassment.
Yeah.
You know, if you saw my sons, you wouldn't think they were mixed race. In fact, my mixed son probably, but the other two, they're almost as dark as me. You wouldn't think they were mixed race at all. You know, they clearly know, because of what I've told them in the past, that they're black. They identify as black, and regardless of whether you say you're mixed race or not, or biracial, you're black. All right, because when you go out to the real world, you're black. When you encounter police in situations like that, which they never have, they've never been in trouble or anything. As I say, they're sportsmen. They're just very dedicated to what they do. You're black, you know, so nothing changes there. It's just, yeah, but for me, it's just, it's an embarrassment. I wouldn't.
Okay, well, thank you for that, honestly. Okay, we have just 2 more questions. Do you believe that because interracial relationships, this is what Reese was saying earlier, that they do mingle the bloodline, thus creating a subracial group, it somehow endangers the preservation of the black race? And this question was on point with what Reese was saying earlier about how it can, you know, mingle our bloodline. Can anyone?
Well, I would say definitely it's pretty much common sense. If I'm black and I'm married a white woman, we have a biracial kid. Actually, if I'm African American, I've done my DNA, I'm 30% European. So even then, my kids won't be 50% black. So now that child is with the white woman, and my grandkids will be, let's say, 15, 20% black. And then, okay, and now if that child is with someone white, then further, so on and so forth. So it does water down the, matter of fact, there are several countries like Brazil that have done things in the past, like importing sperm from Europe so that women can create more white children. So people are actively doing that in certain places so they can, have less black people in certain areas. So I think the question becomes, what do we do in response to that? And how important is it to us to be black and remain black?
That's ridiculous. Importing sperm, that's ridiculous.
That's a bit overboard, but studies are saying that as time goes on, more people are going to look like biracial children. And so I think this watering down of bloodlines is, I'm not going to say a problem, but I think it's an issue that all races have to deal with, because we're no longer segregated and who we date, and some of that stuff is a lot more acceptable now than when I was 5 years old. So just something to think about, that the way people look 50, 60 years from now is going to be very different from what it is now.
And see, that's the root of the question. What happens to the Black race? I mean, we could say the same for Hispanic, but if you notice in Asian cultures, in the Jewish communities, even in some African countries, they do not take spouses outside of their own nation, simply because they want to preserve their heritage. They want to preserve their culture. And then you have some people, some families in this world who actually marry within their family so they can keep their bloodline pure. So
I don't know about that. I definitely think we should go back to
but I don't suggest that. I'm just saying, this is the extreme that some people will take it. Just like, Bilal just said, they have people importing sperm from Europe, which is ridiculous, I mean, but how do we preserve our nation?
It's speaking from an American point of view, it's going to be extremely hard.
Yeah.
When we just talked about it, because we are a melting pot, and we are this cross-cultural, kind of example, and it's going to be extremely hard to preserve that, because we do raise our children to kind of be globally minded, things like that now, and you kind of look at that, and there's no more of those restrictions. There's no more, our grandmother sitting us down in the kitchen telling us, like, you're going to bring a Black woman home, you're going to bring a Black man home, because we want our kids to think differently than we. So I would say definitely in the U.S., you're going to see that we will, as Black people, will become an endangered species. I mean, I don't mean to put it like that, but we will be. Now, when you start talking about culture and heritage, that stuff lives on, right? Stuff lives through texts and artifacts and like that. So if you want to talk about that, that still stands. But if you want to talk about preserving a Black only, that I think that's going to eventually, due to action, it's just going to go away. And you're still going to have some of these African nations, like you said, that don't date outside. But as it becomes more globally, and people open up their borders and, access to certain things, you start to see that interracial happen in other places too, that wasn't willing to that, for hundreds of years.
Or should I ask, do we even care? what happens to the Black race.
I know.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I hope so.
But see, that's the root of the question. Is like, what happens to us, you know, if we continue to marry interracially and we produce a subracial group of biracial children? Now what's happening to our own nation? Do we even care? If we don't care, then the question is moot. But if we care, okay.
No.
Because when for the culture is not just some cool shit to say. We're trying to keep a culture of people self-reliant so that we make a bigger investment to the larger community. So I don't really care how you feel, you know what I'm saying? Like I know that old black lady when we walked in that room who sold us a commercial building in Atlanta, in Savannah, when she seen my wife was black, you should see it in the tears just well in her eyes because she knew what it took for her to get it, and she wanted to make sure someone who looked like her and was from her culture had an opportunity to do the similar thing. So I want to thank her. Thank you. Thank my wife, you know, for not letting me fuck it up.
That's right, Shay.
I appreciate you, Shay.
I want to ask you about your queen, man, because as a black man that's married to a black woman.
A black man married to, unlike some of my critics.
I love that. I got to use that. What did you think of Nick Cannon's comments that white women are looked at as a success? Can you got those?
White women are looked at as success because in America, we see a white woman, I couldn't have you. My daddy couldn't have you. My granddaddy couldn't have you. I would get killed even looking at you. People, if they thought I whistled at you, they would murder me. So now, if I play for the NBA, I want them all. And I could afford them all. That's what they're thinking.
I think that's an old school mentality. We talk about changing narratives. I don't think that narrative is the same anymore. What do you think?
I think it's individual. Some cats is insecure, and you look at the way they move, it shows. You know what I mean? Some dudes still do feel like that. Right. You know what I mean? You can see it. You can see it. And then some dudes just like to wild out, and they like whatever they like, and that's fine too. You know, my thing though is Dr. John Henry Clark talked about. I don't know. It was an African. I think it was. I don't know if it was an African leader or nation. I think it may have been. It may have been even Gaddafi. I don't know who it was. But it was an African leader at some point that says, we're sending you out. No, it wasn't. It was a darker nation. It might have been Nigeria or something. But they said, we're sending our boy off to college. We're sending you to go to get knowledge to come back to make this community better. We're not sending you to go court a white woman and bring a white woman back. And that's hard to hear when everything should be fair and equitable, right? But if I was a Jewish parent who was married to the faith and the culture, and I said that to my child, even though my child might get angry, I wouldn't get frowned upon because I'm only trying to keep my ethnicity and my culture alive. It's a 10,000-year-old religion. Like I can't let you break that because you want to have fun. If I'm a Chinese parent and I say to my Chinese daughter, I want you to marry a Chinese boy, there's a culture attached to that, right? We somehow feel like a black parent saying that, because I got told, don't bring no white girl to my house. Now, straight up, don't bring, have your fun in the streets. Don't bring a white girl in my house. And not because my grandparents hated white people. Just culturally, they wanted us to stay attached. When you go to my wife's town, DJ Envy might not get looked at. Hell, me and you might not, because they want them black. They want a tall black Negro, tall. Like, they want somebody look, they straight out the fields. You know what I'm saying? But culturally, they the closest thing to Africa. When you start going to Hilton Head, them people been untouched for hundreds of years. Like, my wife started talking about her family. I don't even understand what she's saying.
What's going on, boy?
Yeah. So it's nothing wrong culturally with black people feeling the same way. Now, who you love is who you love, and I can't, and that's fine. But if you get Tiger Wooded, don't look for sympathy from me. I'm going to laugh at your chump black ass. You know what I mean? Because you married a babysitter who looked like a soap opera star, and you cheated with a bunch of Hooters hoes. So, you know, I don't have no affection for you when it go fucked up. I'm just saying I've seen, for me, when I look at Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, they husband get in trouble, them hoes gone. Nene stuck by grade.
I can't believe you watch Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Let me tell you something. I watch all Real Housewives. Real Housewives of Panama. You know what I'm saying? Nene, hey man, for real. Like, man.
But you don't get like an Angela Yee, whose mom is black and her daddy Chinese.
I'm not saying you don't get that. I'm not saying that's not great for 90s videos. What I'm saying is Angela Yee just identified as black. She just purposely identified as black. She knows her children stand a better chance of getting shot on the Detroit streets. You understand what I'm saying? That's a different mentality from, we all should be treated fair. The world should. The world should be a lot of things. When you choose to identify as black as a biracial child, to me, that's chosen. You've chosen your side of the line. There's two kind of white people. It's white people that love me and want everything to be fair, and then there's John Brown. So which one are you? It's that simple. I don't think you don't like me or you hate me, but are you willing to be John Brown for me? So if culturally, her parents did something brave at a time where it might not have been brave. One of her parents had to make a conscious decision. I'm breaking from my culture. I'm choosing to identify with this person. To hell be damned, this is what it is. So if that's what your mate is doing, you know what I'm saying? Like, my DJ is a white man. His wife is a black woman, but he's a John Brown. He's going to go the line. He's going to toe the line. Shouts out to Amina, my little niece that was born. Like, he's going to toe the line. So you got to ask yourself, am I willing to toe that line if it come down to it? You know, and who am I marrying and what am I marrying this person? 50% of marriages end up in divorce. So what happens? You know, when your child is out of your house, out of your culture, your child somewhere growing up with a bad haircut. Don't know what the fuck. Like, God bless. I want them all to grow up to be like my man Aubrey. I want them to grow up to be cool as hell like my nigga Drake. But sometimes that shit don't go right and you be in Germany. I'm in Germany and I ask a mixed brother, I say, hey brother, who was black, your mother, father? How did you know? Nigga, cause I'm looking at you. You know what I mean? When I'm in the Dominican Republic, my waiter, beautiful brother, man, gay as all outdoors. Beautiful, handsome brother, man, golden skin like my wife, blondish, kind of sandy, dirty hair. You could tell they probably came on the same boat, him and her. And I say, you know, so who was black? Oh no, I'm like, nigga, I'm looking at you. You black. And I know it's hurtful and I know you don't get treated well, but brother, you black. And you know what I mean? So for me, brother, I take so much pride in it. I love it so much, and I married a black woman. That's right. Unlike some of my critics.
And for the record, 85% of all black men have a black wife, and 93% of black women have black husbands.
We together, y'all. Don't listen to that bullshit. Walmart show you the commercials. You know what I mean? Where everybody self a black man.
And I feel the same way. We was having this conversation yesterday. Like, it's not prejudice. I have a preference. I would love for my daughters to bring home a black man, especially because of the dismantling of the black family that has happened historically.
No, I'm just thinking because I got seven little young kings and queens and princes and princesses here, and the experiences is so different. And I could say, you know, I would want you to marry someone like your mother, right?
Yeah.
And that's pretty vague if you think about it, because I didn't say that it looks like your mother, even though I would prefer that. But they may say, I met a woman and she reminds me of my mom.
But just get to the point, Celeste. Get to the point with
I don't know what that looks like. You know, here I am, focusing on traveling the world and being nomadic and all over the place through their lens. You know, my experience is not the same as theirs. They were raised in a more biblical-based home and household, and so the way they view things are going to be so different. And I would want them to preserve, you know, his blackness, and I will say that blatantly to them. However, who would they meet and who they decide to vibe with, I don't have any control over that, you know?
Yeah. Neither do they, really, because once you see someone and those stars start to, you know, float, it's just like, oh.
And my son let me know that he's about to be 20. He let me know, like, I just feel as if you vibe with who you're going to vibe with. It doesn't have to necessarily be, just because I'm pro-black that I can't vibe with someone I vibe with. But of course, my opinion was different, and I felt, you know, we had a matter of a difference of opinion. However, he said, well, I guess I'm not pro-black if I don't feel that way then. And that's where it just ended.
But Celeste, and so this brings me to the final question, which I purposely put it as the last question because I knew that it would be the most sensitive and the most, probably the toughest question. It's, how do you feel about interracial relationships as it pertains to the Black woman and how she feels to see,
oh my gosh,
her men, quote unquote, prefer someone who's more, and I'm putting it in quotes, more exotic, who has a more exotic appeal than she does.
You know,
and this goes so deep. So that's why I saved it for that.
I can be directed. I don't want to offend anybody, but I know who my husband was and who I am and how I am. I look at that like, oh, they're not really Black. and it's, you know, I don't look at, because I don't, I've seen those situations. When I was younger, it used to bother me. You know, when I was a teenager, I used to be like, man, you know, why? You know, why even? That was just my, you know, my thought. But, you know, if it's, but I will always say, which I also let my son know, if it's genuine, if a relationship is genuine, it's not, I'm only going to date this because of status. I'm only going to date this. I don't like that. If someone genuine, and I can feel, I'm a very I meet a person's spirit before I meet them. I can see when something's genuine or something's more status based, or they're dealing with some deeper issues, and that's fine. I'm like, that's your issue. Don't want you anyway, because that's what you're dealing with. But for me, a real Black man is going to get a real Black woman, and they're looking for that. And a Black woman doesn't look what the way that they try to portray us on television, being whatever that is, ghetto, hood, rat, whores. Pretty much is what they try to say that we are. I know I'm a queen.
Yeah.
I love I stand in my queendom, and a man that will be for me, who I had, will stand in his kingdom. And I know it won't be someone that feels as though he has to go and step outside of his race for some sort of status to make him feel some sort of way, or because quote unquote Black women don't know how to submit.
Okay, so I want to play something really quickly, and we have like 10 minutes left. I just want to play this very quickly, and then I want all of your opinions. So I'm going to turn this up.
I don't mind it when I see a Black girl with a white guy. I'm like, hell yeah, like get that shit, you know? But when I see a Black guy with a white girl, like automatically, like what I feel is just like, I don't know, like I'm not racist because I hang out with a lot of Black people, I have Black friends, but there's something when you see a Black guy that you don't know only if she's hot though. If she's not hot, it's just like whatever. But if you see a Black guy with a hot white girl, it almost feels like, damn, like you're stealing our women, you know? But, you know, it is what it is, I guess.
And I'll play it.
This
is Malcolm X.
He brainwashed the so-called Negro to the point of believing in white supremacy so much that today some Negroes think that they're not making progress, or they don't have anything unless they're living in a white neighborhood, unless they have the white man's neighborhood, a seat in the white man's school, or a position on the white man's job, and they even have taken it so far they don't think they're successful in life unless they have a white woman as a wife.
Okay.
Times are changing as well. I say times are changing. They've changed, and I agree with everything that Malcolm X says there. But I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure myself that it's all changed now. I'm pretty sure that people used to think like that. They can't wait to get into a white neighborhood because it'd be better for them, better for their kids, better schooling, better, you know, living experiences, etc. But I personally, I think that times are changing, and that people would rather be in Black neighborhoods with Black people, being policed by Black police.
I would have to agree with that. Like, one of the things in my neighborhood that I've noticed is it was a predominantly Black neighborhood, and I didn't buy here with those intentions, but it was so uplifting, and so it made me so happy to see that yes, we can have these things. It doesn't have to be that it's a white neighborhood. This is absolutely a Black neighborhood with beautiful homes, and I think it's something that unfortunately that we as Black people have fell into the trap, and not to go down a rabbit hole, but one of the things my grandmother used to say was the worst thing that happened to the Black community was integration. And she used to say that growing up, it was, you were proud to be Black. You were proud to shop at Black stores. You were proud to have Black your kids. You were so proud to do these things. And somewhere along the way, we as society have lost that. If you even think about, like I used to think about when the Black actors and actresses were so upset that they weren't winning Grammys. And I'm like, well, how come we're not making the NAACP award the thing to strive for? Who says the Grammys has to be the end all be all? Why aren't we setting our own standards and doing our own thing? I think we fell into this trap which subconsciously is a kind of like, are we good enough to where we think that the standards that they have set for us is what we should strive for when it doesn't have to be.
Well, I totally agree with exactly what both of you guys have said. Times have changed. I think we've gotten to a point where we realize that we actually already had everything we need in our communities. I think that idea was because we were limited on resources and things like that, and that it just so happened that, you know, we were caught up in some of the shinier things, or we felt like life was going to be better in those new areas. We thought we were going to be accepted, and once we got into those new spaces, we realized that we weren't accepted. We were just there. We existed. Yeah, we existed in those spaces, but we wasn't part of those spaces, right? And so, you know, I agree with you on that integration part right there. I always think to myself, that was the worst thing. That was the worst thing for our colleges and universities, our children's education, our own businesses. That all of that stuff was just torn apart from us. And as you said, you know, who said the Grammy has to be the top award? And then we ended up doing things like the Source Awards, Hip Hop Awards. We got the BET Awards and all these other kind of things that we eventually started to evolve into, you know, to create our own. But I definitely believe that, we don't have to be in their space to feel like we're being successful or that we are of a certain status, because we can do that in our own communities. And it's been seen throughout the U.S. and other parts of the world where you have these affluent neighborhoods, these thriving neighborhoods that are like neighborhoods.
I mean, people over here, we talk about what area would you live in, or if you went to a different country, yada, yada, yada. And everything and anything I tend to hear is, are there black people in that area? That's the main thing that people want to know, because me personally, I don't want to move any. I'd love to move to the countryside here in the UK, because they have some beautiful houses, some beautiful areas. But I don't want to move anywhere, but there's no black.
Right. I'm there. I mean, I'm having a struggle with that literally in this moment, you know, where my son wants to move to New Zealand or Australia, and the first thing I said, well, are there black people there? And you know, I'm like, cause I even just being here and having been so removed, I'm like, man, I just love my people, I love my men. I just, you know, I'm just in this zone, and I'm like, gosh, do I want to really be somewhere for a long period of time where I don't have that? You know, that was my question this morning. As I was working.
I think you have to worry more so about all those killer animals they have over there. Flying snakes. You good? I'm good. I won't come visit you in Australia.
Oh my gosh, that's in the outback, you know. But I don't know. I do have that. I mean, a lot of what Malcolm X said, and I love his teachings. A lot of that is still underlying in our community. A lot of our athletes, our professionals don't feel as though they have arrived, so to speak, if they don't have a white counterpart. And then a lot of them, you know, some of them who would speak up be like, that was the worst mistake I ever made in my life. You know, I should have stayed within my own. I should have, I shouldn't have pigeonholed and said our black women are just this. We're so diverse.
Yeah.
You know, so
it's one of the things that, you know, I agree with what Malcolm X said to a point. I know my father didn't marry my mother thinking that life was going to be better, because they started out in a car and they were spat on for a good majority of my childhood. I've witnessed my parents go through a ton of racism and having food thrown at them and stuff like that. But also the beauty of it is, Celeste, what I think is very amazing is that you have those options to be able to say that I want to move to this country or that country. And the fact that we're to a point where we can even think about those things as a possibility, you know, because there were times when we couldn't.
Me personally, I'll say two quick things. I think one, I agree that that desegregation was one of the worst things for us, and I think that we should re-desegregate. Um, Not only that, I think I feel mixed on the issue of do we still have the same kind of mentality as we did before. I think yes and no. I think more conscious, black people like us, we will say yes. We want to know if there are any black folks in this area and that area to connect with, and so on and so forth. But then there's the other side. The majority of us, as soon as we get some fame or some money, where do we go and what do we do? You know, we marry somebody white, or we move into different neighborhoods, like white neighborhoods, because we can afford the larger homes and so on and so forth. And there's this sort of discourse going around where we say things like, well, why would I do anything for those people in that neighborhood? I left that neighborhood, so on and so forth. So I think it's about 50-50. Have we made some progress with ourselves? I think some, but not enough for us to rest on our laurels or clap our hands or clap us on the back for it. No, I think we still got a long way to go to be where we should be.
And that's pretty interesting. As I kind of think about this too, is we sit up here, and I think Angel just mentioned it. We're here in a place where we're mobile now, right? And we see people who can leave the U.S. for many different reasons, and I know that a lot of us encourage other Black people to leave the U.S. And so that kind of makes me think too, is like, okay, if we tell our people to leave and to move on and find these other spaces, going back to the question that you had mentioned earlier, like the kind of like the idea of our culture going extinct. With that idea too, I guess we kind of be doing the same exact thing, is actually moving our people out and just putting them in other places. So it would be very interesting. I guess I pose that question, like, would that kind of be the same idea? Do we want to encourage our people to leave because they're not treated that same way? Or do we want to continue to build in the spaces that we are to carve out and build for ourselves?
I say leave. I say leave, because you're never going to be able to do what you want to do in that country. Anytime that we have tried to build our own, we've been bombed, massacred, we've been lynched. So much has happened to where whenever we make those steps to be independent, they shut it down.
It's only Black people.
And right. It's only Black. We had our own thriving community, Black Wall Street, and the Tulsa riots. It was awful what they did.
Even beyond that, if you look into the Red Summer of 1917, 1918, many neighborhoods, we had many neighborhoods like Black Wall Street that were destroyed. And you look into that history, and it really makes you angry. And these are the same folks that tell us today that, they don't want to pay us for reparations. We don't deserve a Black agenda in politics or anything. I'm just like, whoa, these people really... I'm not going to say every last single one, but a large enough number hate us.
Yeah.
For sure.
Black people have no friends anyway.
They fear us.
They fear us. That's exactly what it is. They fear who we are, because we're kings and queens, and they know that, and they fear us. But I can't say all white people hold to that, because there was a young lady who was supposed to be on the show today. She's a Caucasian lady. She's one of my closest friends, and she's married to a Black man, and she gave her perspective on what life is like. And she said, I wrote down her notes. I wanted to share just one thing that she said. She said, as a wife, she says, I'm joining my husband and his family and all the cultural traditions that it entails. So it's part of my job to make sure I uphold him and his ways and traditions and instill these things in our children. Not to say that I can't bring some of me in there either, but my husband takes priority. So I guess the question people might have is a white woman capable of instilling her Black husband's culture in their kids? She said, I think on some levels, based on what he can show me, and in ways I can't, then he can do so, or his family.
No, she can't.
I don't think she can. I think she can expose them and maybe, you know, encourage them, but her herself, no.
No, it's not the same. Not the same.
Yeah, it's good to be like well intentioned, but and to say this is what I want to do with it, where other things are oftentimes very different. It's very good to be well intentioned. I'm not knocking that at all. It's a beautiful thing to have the desire. But sometimes, like if you have a spouse that's of a different race and you want a particular culture to be imbued upon them, sometimes you just have to step to the side and let them do their thing and observe.
Okay. So Angel, you being biracial, do you think that I think your mom is white. Do you think that your mom could have instilled Blackness in you?
No, I don't think that she could have. But she didn't she didn't shield me from anything. You know, race and culture was always an open conversation in my household. You know, my mother wasn't like, you're going to accept, you know, one side's ideals over the next. She wasn't like that at all. You know, but I don't think that she can teach me the Black experience. That's going to come from my aunts and my uncles and my father and my other Black family members.
What about
my grandparents? Huh?
What about Brittany?
Oh.
Brittany, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you think that your father could have instilled some kind of, I guess, connection to being Black? Let's say your mom, most I forbid, she passed away. Do you, at a certain time early in your life, do you think that he could have instilled Black culture?
No, I don't think so. I mean, even though he was a fan of Black culture, Black music, Black food, you know, that kind of thing. But no, he's total white guy. You know.
I like Chinese food, but that don't mean, you know, I could teach a Chinese
Exactly.
food.
You know, okay, he can expose me to those things, but Black culture in and of itself, like, no, not at all.
Would that actually be that person's job to actually try to instill that?
Well, see, that was her point. She was saying that because she's married to a Black man and she will be raising his children, she wants to make sure that she is instilling her husband's culture in her children. Even though she is white, she's saying that her husband's culture would take precedent because she does believe that, you know, the husband is the progenitor of, you know, her child's nation. Just like, I think it was Reese who said when she went to the hospital, they tried to get her to check white because Noah's dad is white. She's a Bible believer, so in the Bible, the father determined the nationality, not the mom. Only in Judaism does the mom determine the nation. So,
do you think that if a white parent tried to instill, this is just my thought process, the Black experience, I think it's secondhand, so it's watered down. It's not an authentic, like she can't teach, you know, what it feels like to be followed around the store. She can't teach what it feels like to, you know.
It just makes me think of that white girl or that white guy who grew up in the neighborhood who got co-signed on by her homegirls or their homeboy, right? Mm-hmm. And then they try to portray it. But I think that's when it comes back and backfire, because you can't give an experience that you never lived in that sense. You know, you could, again, we can live in the same hood,
right,
but our stories are going to be different. And then to put that out there. So I agree that no, I cannot. That's like trying to give a Mexican, like, going to give them the Mexican side of it
the heritage. It's like, no, I can say things or do certain things, but I can't keep that full experience.
And I think that's what you were saying. I'm sorry. Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. Yeah. And that will be, no, you can't do that.
Because what she said was, I think I can on some level based on what he can show me, but in the other ways, then it will be up to him to teach the children or his family.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of along the lines of what Angel was saying.
It made me think about just when we were discussing earlier about culture and what is Black culture. You know, I think at the helm of our people, wherever we are in the world, it's the spiritual connection. It's just the connection that we have, and we can just give a look and we know. You know, it's the feeling that we have when we the music that we create. When we dance the way we do dance, it's not just African American culture. I mean, when I'm into the Afrobeat scene, and when I'm dancing, you know, it's just this connection, this spiritual connection, this unspoken of connection that we just have as a people. That where our culture, others don't really have.
Not to explain, it just is, yeah.
It just is. I don't have to say. We have all the different experiences, and we in individual, you know, traveling and being exposed to many different things. But there's just, you know, where you are. I have been in schools where I was like the second Black person or the first Black person, where it's just this look, you just know, you can just connect. that for me, that's the culture of our people. That's why we sing and we move and we dress and we walk the way that we do. It's this connection that we have.
You can see other Black people and say, "You good?" and that could mean 10 different things. But as that connection, you're gonna know what they meant when they said, "Hey, you good?" Just because it's just that connection, no matter where you are, where you're from. It's just. It is what it is.
Even where you were raised, even if you were an African American male or female that was raised in predominantly, maybe you were in foster care or adopted, it's still this underline where you know you can look at that person and hey, are you good?
Okay, so I just want to say this: we've gone 10 minutes past the mark. So if you still want to talk, I have time, or if you want to end it now, we definitely can. I'll just leave it up to you all.
I'm staying. I want to cuss some more. I'm staying.
Okay, if you want to stay, you can. I'm here. It doesn't matter. I can, whatever we use beyond this point, I can just add it in as a highlight. If you want to drop off, no offense will be taken. I've already taken enough of your time, and I really, really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I thank you all for participating. And for sure, you are all welcome to sit down again with me and have some more discussions. We got another segment coming up on Black men and mental health. I think that's a really good segment that we need to.
Yeah, we're crazy.
just like the ladies over here, we crazy too. We crazy too. So, you know, so you guys, if you want to stay on, if you have time and you like the discussion, by all means, it's Thursday night. I ain't got nothing to do. So if y'all want to stay on, for sure, stay on. If you want to drop off, thank you so much.
It's Thursday night, girl. You know, Thursday over here.
Turn up. Turn up.
Yeah, Egyptian Thursdays. Thank God it's Thursday.
You know, this is our Friday. This Friday for us.
I miss that.
But it's conditioning. I mean, slavery taught us that, number one, a Black man couldn't love himself. That's number one. So if you don't love yourself, you can't love anything that comes from you, and that's a part of you. And number two, it also taught a Black man that he couldn't love a Black woman, because you never know when you'll be separated from your family, when your woman could be raped, when your woman could be sold away, and just being loved. Like, they got mad if we even loved on each other as slaves. So
Exactly.
like, and that has gone on for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. And so now we get to this day and age where, like they said in that video, the Black woman is the most mistreated, most violated, most disrespected person on the earth.
That is absolutely true.
And people, you know, like when you reach a certain status, I would think as a black man, it'd be like, let me go back and love on the person that's been there, you know, love on the people that over the years have just shown us love. And it's just kind of sad.
And that's why I agree with RZA.
Well, one of the other things